Okay. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Sylvie Kaufmann. I'm a journalist with Le Monde, the French newspaper, and I want to have the privilege to moderate this panel. And I will start by commending the organizers and the sponsors of this GLOBSEC, because I think it is, they took a very bold decision to organize this meeting in such circumstances. So thank you for this, what we call in French, audace. There's another word I'm going to utter, and it's hybrid. Hybrid is very much the catchword now, as NATO has been learning to fight hybrid warfare. And we are learning to handle hybrid conferences. So it has been going on pretty well so far, but bear with me if we have any problems, but I'm being optimistic. Precisely today, we are going to discuss a compass of stability, NATO's ageless utility, or not. And I have, for this discussion with me, physically present in person, which is a luxury, Minister Jaroslav Nať, who is Minister of Defense of the Slovak Republic, and in Riga, via video link, Mr. Artis Pabriks, who is Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense for the Republic of Latvia. And across the Atlantic, Harjit Singh Sejjan, who is Minister of National Defense of Canada. So welcome to all of you. I'm really happy to have the three of you kind of united. And the way we're going to proceed for this panel is very much similar to the previous ones. I'm going to moderate the discussion between the three of you for the first part of this session, and then we'll open the floor to the questions from the audience, so both the audience here in Bratislava. I think you will just have to raise your hands. And I will give you the floor, and you will introduce yourself and specify who your question is addressed to. And the audience online, wherever you are around the world, you are also welcome to ask your questions. So I'm going to start with you, Minister Nať. Among the many challenges that NATO faces, how do you assess the risk posed by the pandemic? In Slovakia, you've been going through various stages. It started quite well, but also as a member of NATO, how have you gone through this situation, and how do you see the risk itself it poses?
Thank you, Sylvia, and I'd like to start first with sending warm greetings to my fellow colleagues, ministers. Good to see you both. With Minister Pabriks, we met last week during a separate conference, right, on cyber issues. So it's twice within 2 weeks. Good to see you. And second, I'd like to congratulate to the organizers of this outstanding event. It's really difficult to organize under such circumstances this excellent conference. And I'm not saying this only because I'm the former team member of GLOBSEC, but obviously this is something extraordinary, and I'd like to say that I congratulate them and I cross my fingers for the whole conference to survive these difficult times.
You started very early this morning. I understand you had a cabinet meeting at 6 a.m.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was the first cabinet meeting actually, starting from 6 a.m., which is unique, but it looks like there might be a tendency for continuation.
Good.
We'll see. Yeah, on the topic. Obviously, pandemic situation in Slovakia had 2 stages. The first one was quite well managed. We were among the best countries, at least in the European Union, but I think worldwide, in terms of casualties and in terms of sickness of population. But now, yes, we have, even today, I think almost 900 sick people, which is the record. all-time record in Slovakia. Armed forces were involved from the very beginning, really having deployed in some days almost 1,500 soldiers with different tasks, helping as military doctors, trying to help police on borders, trying to help in Roma communities, trying to help hygiene specialists, and obviously helping the whole infrastructure with supply management, really for medicine, for various important measures we have taken during the first wave of pandemic, but also in the second wave, starting to be more and more involved. This worked very well, and it helped us. Also in terms of, I would say, public communication, how important armed forces are in the domestic crisis management. It was something new also for people. They were kind of used to see our soldiers being deployed to Afghanistan, to Iraq, to various operations under EU, UN, NATO umbrella. But now they really saw our soldiers being deployed for domestic crisis management. It was very important also in terms of communication with the members of cabinet, with the Prime Minister. He saw personally how important soldiers are, how important armed forces are for various regions, not only for deployments to operations. And yes, it was very good also for NATO, for Alliance, because Alliance had a chance to, I would say, show to people, also general public, but also specialists, defense specialists, that the alliance is also important in terms of cooperation and collaboration, I would say, with allies in pandemic issues. And we in Slovakia, for example, we used Salis for transportation of goods from China. We used also this donation of critical equipment solution, received some assistance from the United States and helped Montenegro. So yes, I think that we were able to show to people that there is no real alternative, especially for small countries like Slovakia is, but NATO, and NATO has proven its, I would say, raison d'être, really for many specialists, experts, but also for general public in Slovakia.
Minister Pabriks, I will turn to you now. Is it your experience also that was a positive opportunity, if I may say, for NATO? We heard several times Secretary General Stoltenberg talking about the vulnerability of supply chains that was shown by this crisis also. How do you see this from where you sit?
Well, I try to be optimist despite of coming from the Northern Europe. And in that respect, I try to catch something apart of COVID-19, what is positive in all this. And if I have to analyze now the situation, I would say that this is something like a live exercise for our military and our interoperability with other facets of society. And in our Latvian case, it went very much along with our recently, before COVID-19 started, adopted plan to introduce in Latvia so-called comprehensive defense system, which in few words means a very good correlation and cooperation between military, between free business and entrepreneurship, and then between civil society, NGOs, and all other state and municipal institutions. So before COVID-19 started, we already initiated such type of exercises, and now, when infection was around, we could really look or check what is our resilience of society, what is logistics, as you mentioned, and what is the discipline of society, and what kind of other challenges we can see during the pandemic, which is distracting our attention. So it's some kind of trying to keep your capabilities And the awareness, because all other challenges what we were facing, they were not abolished, just like other diseases are not abolished because of COVID-19. So how can we interact in a more difficult environment? Let's put it like this. And logistics, of course, have been one of the hardest parts which have been immediately hit, because before that we were living in our dream world, which is called global world, where we always could look for some cheaper production somewhere else in the world, and we were speaking about the global village where, you know, everything travels, people travel, goods travel, etc. When pandemic was hitting European continent, we suddenly figured out that even the free movement of goods suddenly, which is one of the fundamentals of European Union, is not anymore functioning 100%, because suddenly countries were finding out that they don't have enough face masks, they don't have enough gloves, they don't have not enough disinfection materials, and they were trying to save these things for themselves, first of all. So it happens something like in a plane when you read in manual, if oxygen is dropping, you first help yourself, and then you try to help your kid or nearby stander or sitter. So logistics, of course, was a problem. What was our response? Our response was that we immediately initiated in our country the questionnaire for all state institutions. What are those crucial material reserves we need in different types of crises, with particular attention to COVID-19? Now, at this moment, I can report you that in this case, our Ministry of Defense was responsible for purchasing, distributing, and guarding or logistically putting in warehouses all this equipment. We have almost 3 months reserve for all the necessary things against COVID-19. And we also have been relatively fast starting a production in a country thanks to the private business for a number of the things we were importing previously from China or some other countries. So that's just one example. I also would say, last but not least, that it was a very good checkup for the discipline in our society, because as you know, Baltic countries in spring and summer were much more successful than many others. More successful than ourselves at this moment, because now we have this second wave also here. But I would say this is because our society was listening to experts. We government as well were listening to the experts, to doctors, and that basically allowed us for a few months to create this so-called Baltic bubble with almost no disease around. So life was going on almost as usual. Military was practically not infected. Our EFP group, including our friends from Canada and Slovakia, were staying safe and are still safe.
Yes.
I think it was a very good learning ground. Unfortunately, this is not over. People are looking forward to end this exercise, but I think the end is still not here.
Thank you, but you have already learned some important lessons. So, Minister Sejan, I will turn to you now. How, in your view, should the alliance and NATO adapt to this new situation? Secretary General Stoltenberg earlier talked about the uncertainty, and this is very much something we all have now in our mind, that we are living in an age of uncertainty. I understand that the military don't particularly like uncertainty, but they have to adapt to it. So how do you ensure collective defense while preparing for uncertainty? How do you see it yourself?
First of all, I just want to pass on my personal thanks to you for moderating, and to my two colleagues who, unfortunately, we can't meet in person, but it's great to be able to talk to you virtually. This uncertainty is something that no one wishes for, but I think 2020 has definitely thrown uncertainty at us in a significant way. And what this has resulted in is allowing us to take a look at the decisions that we made in the past, and are we moving forward enough to have that ability to respond. So for example, at NATO, and it's a great example of what NATO has already been doing, of, are we asking the questions? Are we fit for purpose? Making the appropriate changes, having our defense and deterrence posture. Are we investing in the right capabilities? And so because of this conversation that we've been having for years now, with this uncertainty of COVID that has been brought before us, had allowed us to be able to respond. So for example, I think having a great unity, we were able to look at, if you look at where COVID has gone, it's gone from when you knew which nations were getting it and who was about to get it. So staying in touch with some of our partners in Italy and Spain and many other NATO allies, in Canada, we were able to learn about what was happening, what type of response should we in the military take. So it really informed my thought process on how the military should be responding based on the discussions. So we were able to then set up in Canada an appropriate response. We had over 24,000 troops on standby. Fortunately, we didn't have to use all of it for response. We also have to be mindful that it's not just COVID we have to be ready for. We have to look at all the other security challenges that we face around the world, making sure that our missions continue, and they did. But also we have to respond to domestic challenges from climate change, floods and fires, of which we had in Canada. Unfortunately, this year, we didn't have that significance. So this uncertainty, as much as we don't like it, is a reality. So it's a demonstration, as my colleagues already mentioned. We have to take a look at what type of resiliency do we have in our own countries? And when you have that resiliency inside your own nations, then you're able to respond better for the collective good. And that's what NATO is about. Had a discussion with the NATO Secretary General of what type of role that could NATO play in supporting other nations, because we do have a responsibility to support other nations, especially nations that have that capability. So Canada participating in providing logistical support in Africa and also in Central and South America. And that's what we will continue to do, is look at where we're at, learn from one another, and look at what capabilities do we need to develop further? And I think COVID has really reminded us of this. So even in this uncertainty, as much as we don't like it, is a great opportunity for us to make sure that we have that resiliency inside our own nations, but also collectively in NATO to demonstrate that resiliency together as well.
Well, thank you very much. That's a very good way of a very good transition to the next point. I would like to talk about NATO itself now. Steve Clements earlier asked if we needed a NATO reset, but you know, NATO is working on this NATO to 2030 reflection group, and we should have its report in the coming months, I think. What is for you the biggest issue that this NATO of the future will have to tackle? Is it building more resilience? Is it, being resuscitated after being brain dead, as somebody said? Will it be climate change? Will it be Russia? What is according? How do you see it yourself?
Absolutely, it's a combination of all factors that you have mentioned. Actually, there was a very good discussion with the NATO Secretary General just before our session, and he already mentioned his view on a need for a new strategic concept. And I absolutely agree with him. This discussion about NATO 2030 is important as a step before a real discussion on the strategic concept. And in this strategic concept, we need to cover all issues that you have mentioned, including climate change, including Russia, China. On one hand, the readiness of NATO allies, of NATO itself. On the other hand, resilience. While talking about readiness, yes, all of us, and Jens Stoltenberg mentioned that, all of us, we are spending more. Also in Slovakia, we're almost hitting 1.9% of GDP for defense this year. And we're spending more, but it's also about spending better. We need to focus on capability targets. And capability targets are changing under these circumstances, including domestic crisis management capabilities. But while talking about, I would say, standard military capabilities that we need to focus on. Yes, we are now focusing on heavy mechanized brigade in Slovakia, investing a lot of money in years to come for this capability. But it doesn't mean that we will not focus, that we will not invest to other areas as well. We are working now on the new Slovak security strategy and defense strategy. And I'm almost sure, absolutely sure, that both of these documents will cover also pandemic situation. But they will cover also cybersecurity more than previously. They will cover more issues like propaganda, disinformation. We are on the eastern flank, and we, on a daily basis, are facing these kind of threats. So, you know, I think Secretary General said that we should make sure that the health crisis does not become a security crisis. And it has many ways how to cover this his sentence. One of them is that, yes, we should focus on pandemic, for sure. And it is a daily business for us also in government. But for sure, we shouldn't forget what's the main reason of NATO and what's the main threat that we need to face.
Minister Pabriks, what is your priority? Is it still Russia? Were you surprised when President Macron said that NATO was brain dead? Did you understand it? Did you understand what he meant? And, or, you know, do you think the response? Do you think there has been a response to this concern?
Russia never has been our priority. Our priority was European Union and NATO, but the life is so that Russia is our neighbor. And as far as the security concerns, our priority is, first of all, to guarantee our country's independence, democracy and freedoms, which have been attacked several times in the 20th century from the Russian side. And that, of course, puts us in a little bit of a difficult situation because we don't see the end of the light, the light at the end of the tunnel. And that means that our requirements to EU and NATO is to have a strong solidarity and not to fall into the trap of division, which is frequently used by our Russian neighbors, either bilaterally with different EU nations, or using cyber attacks, using strategic communication, using energy policy, etc., etc. As far as France's President Macron, well, I don't think that that was a proper description of NATO, speaking about brain dead. But we had a very nice and interesting visit of French President just last week here in Latvia, including also our counterparts from the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we were asking a lot of questions. We have a lot of common things from Macron's ideas how we should reform European Union, not so much about NATO. One thing we are still kind of not grasping fully, which is about the so-called strategic dialogue with Russia, because here in the Baltics and in Latvia, of course, we would like to talk with anybody, but in order to talk, you need a mutual trust, and you need to know what exactly you want to gain from this talk. And we do not want to, let's say, be losers in these negotiations. We do not want to engage into the small talk just because of the small talk. And if this talk is organized as far as a dinner, knowing our bitter experience in 1939, 1940, and etc., this time we abstain to pay the bill. So that should be covered by somebody else and not on our national expense. So we have a lot of other priorities. Unfortunately, the Russian issue is also on our neck because we consider ourselves to be quite an expert of this, just like we were warning about events in Belarus already for 2 years. It happens. And now I can tell that what I'm concerned, that the infection, of, if I may say so, of Belarusian democracy movement might infect also Russian public in Russia. And this is then what is worrying us, because if it happens, it might also challenge our borders. And we want to be, if I may say so, deadly sure that nobody is willing to cross the NATO and EU border, which happens to be also Latvian border.
Thank you very much. Minister Sejan, before I turn to the questions, in less than a month's time, there's going to be a very important election in your neighborhood, just south of your border. How do you think the result will affect NATO? How important is it to the future of NATO?
I think regardless of the result of the election, I think what you'll see is a very strong Atlantic bond. NATO has played a very important role, and I had the privilege of working with many secretaries of defense, starting with Ash Carter under the Obama administration, and then Jim Mattis and Mr. Shanahan, and now Mark Esper, and all have demonstrated a very strong message of unity when it comes to NATO. So I think regardless of the election, there always will be a strong support for NATO. But that does not mean we're not going to have difficult conversations, and we should. The work that Secretary General is currently doing is about making sure that NATO is always fit for purpose. So this is what good colleagues do when you have many nations have come together for the collective good of their own nations. You need to have difficult conversations and evolve the organizations. And any organization that does not evolve, does not innovate, becomes stagnant and does not remain relevant. And so I always look at when we're able to look at yourself critically as a positive step. So we will have, I think, these conversations. There's many conversations from the 5 years that I've been defense minister and seen the evolution at NATO. The Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group was one perfect example of how NATO can respond to a threat. From the time that a decision that we made, the leaders made, to going to fully operational capability within 1 year was quite something. The naval presence that we have with our new task forces in the North and the Mediterranean is a great example. The air policing with NATO that we do collectively is another example of that. The command structure that's changing, the investments that we're making as every nation and how it supports collectively to NATO, the cyber work that is ongoing. A lot of great work is happening because we had tough conversations on this. And so I look forward to the results of the U.S. election, and we look forward to working with the administration that the U.S. citizens select.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Maybe I should mention an elephant in the room, which is Turkey. Turkey is, of course, a member of NATO and a very important one. It is more and more involved in regional conflicts, often at odds with fellow NATO members. Minister Nagy, I know that the East Mediterranean is far away from Bratislava or from Riga, or from Ottawa, of course. But the Caucasus is closer to you. Nagorno-Karabakh is closer to this region. Does this make you uncomfortable?
Of course it does. And both of these, I would say, situation, both between Turkey and Greece, and in Nagorno-Karabakh, both of these situations, I think, make all of us nervous, cautious. We'd like to see a very calm and peaceful situation in both of these areas, and I believe that also the recent visit of NATO Secretary General in Greece and Turkey, I believe, helped to decrease tension, I would say. And obviously, we consider Turkey to be very important ally in NATO, and in many areas we cooperate very, very smoothly and very closely, and I believe this will continue to be so. Sometimes different opinion doesn't mean a bad thing. Sometimes it's a good. Sometimes it's good to have a deeper dialogue on concrete issues, and I spent several years in NATO as the Slovak MOD representative, and spent hours and hours discussing on various things when one of the allies had a different opinion than the others. That's okay, but we need to be based on common values, and as far as we stick to common values, that's all right.
But is it the case?
As far as somebody is crossing the way, then we need to send a very clear signal. Mm-hmm. We are based on common values.
Mm-hmm. Minister Papriks, is it your opinion on Turkey?
Well, I think it's an extremely complicated matter because, of course, we are not satisfied with a situation which now develops in a last 5, 6, 7 years as far as relationship between European Union and NATO, first of all, between European Union and Turkey, first of all. But I must say that also our EU policies sometimes, 5, 7 years ago, could have a healthy, critical approach also from our side, because not everything what we on the EU side were doing, starting with 2004, 6, 7, when we had negotiations with Turkey, were correct. Let's admit that. I think from that respect, this is a challenge. Bilaterally, in our region, we do not have problems with Turkey, but we can see that in a region which is around Turkey, starting with Syria, Libya, and now also Northern Caucasus, Turkey is playing an important role. But Turkey is not an only player there. So I would say, again, reflecting to how do we think here in the Northern Europe, I think we should start with ourselves. We can easily blame President Erdogan and Turkey for many things, but we were not doing a number of issues on our side as well fully correctly. And that is a problem, because small bend at the beginning is making a very, very huge bend at the end of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Minister Sejan, do you have something to add on this issue of Turkey?
Not much to add. When you will have bilateral disagreements between nations, but when it becomes a security issue, it is deeply concerning. It's very heartened to see that techno agreement has moved forward between the two nations. But let's look at on the flip side of things. Imagine if there wasn't a NATO. Where potentially could these disputes go? Right now, NATO, because of that NATO unity, has allowed for much greater conversation for bringing tensions down. So I have to look at that as a positive step.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions in the audience here? I don't. So while you are thinking about further questions, I have another one for you, Minister Sejan, and I guess your colleagues will also have something to say about this. It's an issue which has been raised also previously with Mr. Stoltenberg, and it's about European defense. But I'm going to you first, because you're not part of Europe, so you probably see this from a different different perspective. So, do you see it as a threat to NATO cohesion? There is visibly at the moment, and particularly still since the COVID crisis has started, there is more of a sense of there's all this talk about strategic autonomy, which is now being mentioned not only in Paris but also in Berlin, and this European Commission, which wants to have a more assertive role on the geopolitical scene. And so what do you see it as a threat to NATO cohesion from Canada?
No, absolutely not. The work I think the European Union is doing is not a threat to NATO, but it's complementary. And all the discussions that we have had at NATO or even bilaterally with respective European nations has been about making sure that there is a strong European Union. And I think COVID is a great example of this, where NATO is a very strong military alliance. It's about sending a message of deterrence. And strong European Union, when it comes to defense, complements NATO's strength as well. That resiliency that we talk about, that COVID has reminded all nations on how they need to look. We need to look at it from a North American perspective. The stronger we are from a Canadian resilience or North American resilience allows us to be able to be stronger NATO allies. Obviously, there are going to be some aspects that we need to be mindful that it is actually complementary. This can't be just strictly words that we speak about or write on pieces of paper. We need to demonstrate this. And some of the work that has been done in terms of the security work the European Union is doing has complemented NATO. For example, discussions on making sure that we're able to move military forces between nations quickly, making sure that our road networks are complementary in Europe so that they were able to respond. Again, the Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group is one example where sometimes we need to be able to exercise in different nations, being able to move. And we got to make sure that the equipment that we move, as they go across the roads or bridges, have the capacity to take on all those types of vehicles. So there's many examples to become complementary, and we just need to make sure that it remains on that path.
You want to comment on this, because I'm sure it's a topic which is quite important for you.
Absolutely, and there's not much to add officially, I would say, on what my Canadian colleague has just covered. But very sincerely, I'm well known here in my country, also in the past when I was analyst, to be quite critical on various initiatives of the European Union in defense that were not working very well. And it was, honestly saying, in some areas, waste of time and resources. If we have European Union battle groups, why haven't we deployed them so far? It's been 15 years, I think, since the beginning of existence. And there were some concrete situations where we were able to deploy European battle groups. But yes, on the other hand, there are some concrete, very positive examples, like already mentioned, so-called EU defense Schengen, right? I think we should go step by step. We should find appropriate projects, but we should be very careful of duplication and of waste of resources and time. Sometimes it doesn't help. Sometimes it helps, but we need to be very careful.
Minister Pabriks, again, I'm going to mention President Macron, not because he's my president, but he was in your country just last week, I think, and in Lithuania, and he asked Lithuania to. He mentioned this. This habit of buying American weapons, and he tried to encourage Lithuania, and I'm sure it was for you too, various countries to stop buying American weaponry. What do you think of this?
Well, in many ways, and this is without prejudice, I see Macron as a very attractive politician. I heard that in Lithuania he might had such offers. There were no such offers in Latvia, but I can say that I can give to France an offer also to sell French weaponry and French goods to Latvian army. Moreover, we would be very much ready to cooperate with French military industries. Because what I'm suggesting, and this goes hand in hand with that what my colleague from Slovakia already told about European Union plans and activities, because we personally, we are buying different type of quality weapons from different countries, not only United States. For us here, first of all, the priority is quality. Secondly, we here in Latvia prioritize, and this is my personal priority, also the correlation between military purchases and cooperation in industry, where European Union have been putting some steps forward. Finally, we have also some kind of activities regarding the European industry. And here, my personal views very much correspond to that of President Macron. But if France or any other European country, Germans or somebody else, would like to be more active in cooperation as far as military industry or weaponry, then ask why Americans are so successful. And the answers are multiple. First of all, Americans are the ones on which we can really rely as military assistance if needed. Many European countries, sorry to say, alone are not capable to provide much of assistance. But as far as the military industry and weapons are concerned, I think here is a very interesting prospect. There are government-to-government projects and proposals, which some countries are simply not favoring. I personally prefer government-to-government deals. And secondly, there is a military assistance from the United States part. So if such country as France, but not only, Germany or any other country, would like to have a better discussion, let's say, with my capital, Riga, the military assistance from your country, 50%, we give additional 50%, we purchase from you. Very simple. Follow the American suggestions and example, and you will be much more successful in European integration. Why does European Union countries are not following this example and trying to invent something which, instead of the things which are working?
Mm-hmm. That's a very candid and pragmatic answer. Do we still have no questions from the audience? No, you're not being inspired by this I find this conversation very inspiring personally, but we'll go on because there are many issues that we haven't touched yet. Another big one is China, of course. It's so big that I don't know how to take it first, where to start. Well, one obvious aspect is that China is the second budget defense in the world now. Do you feel threatened by this? Do you think NATO is up to the task on this challenge? Maybe I will start with Minister Sajan on China.
First of all, I think, yes, when it comes to NATO and up to the task, absolutely. When you bring together the collective resources of all the NATO allies, it's significant, and that's something we always need to be mindful of. This is as having many nations together allows for a robust debate, but when we come together and a decision is made, it sends a very significant message when it comes to the innovation, the resources, the defense industry that goes behind it as well. And so when it comes to China and their ambition when it comes to defense, is something that we monitor very closely. And for us as NATO allies, we want nations to work within a rules-based order. And this is something that has created concern for us. With some of the things that China has done. And I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to talk about our two Canadians who have been arbitrarily detained in China. This type of hostage diplomacy is not what good rules-based order nations do. So if you want to be part of the global rules-based order, we need to have greater predictability, and these are type of things that goes against the norm. So you come into question a nation's true ambitions. And I want to also thank our NATO allies for being so strong in support of Canada and asking for the release of our 2 Canadians. So now then we look at China's aspects, what they do around the world. Obviously, there's a great opportunity when it comes to what all nations want to do. This prosperity of our own nations depends on the trade that we have with other nations, and China is something that all nations have been trading with. We have great relationships when it comes to some aspects of our trade, but some of the security issues are challenging. And so some of the actions that have been demonstrated in the South China Sea have been obviously concerning. But these are some of the things that we'll continue to monitor. And we need to monitor in NATO. That's why we always talk about NATO needs to look 360. This is not just about being reactionary to a problem. It's about making sure that any nation out there sees the collective will of what NATO brings to the table, and that's that strong message of defense and deterrence. And what that allows, I think, all nations around the world to do is to have greater predictability. And I think 2020 has really demonstrated the importance of predictability. Because with predictability, you're able to have agreements in place when it comes to trade, look at the various norms, international laws that have been placed. Nations can follow it. If you have a dispute, there's mechanisms that you can follow. So these are some of the things that I think we need to be mindful of, but absolutely NATO is fit for purpose for dealing with any type of threats around the world. But ultimately, our job is to making sure that we send a message of deterrence to prevent any conflict.
Mm-hmm. Minister Pabriks, China is very successful also in the technological field, not only in defense field, but also, and this has of course a lot of implications for security and cyber security. Your region is a target for disinformation and manipulation of information. Does it only come from Russia, or are you worried about Chinese activity in this sector as well?
Madam, Chinese question is larger in this case than NATO. And we have been touching upon this question also during President Macron's visit. And I would like to start with an example, because I think the ultimate goal, if we want that liberal democratic rules prevail in the world, and these rules represent we in the West, in transatlantic community, if we want to do this, then we have to act together, and we have to act from the position, I would say, also from strength. And strength is coming out from our resilience, from our capabilities with the new technologies, from the capabilities in the digital world, and also from our political will. And Sargit mentioned one of the issues, for instance, like trade. And we, of course, can blame President Trump that he was abolishing also these negotiations between the European Union and United States about transatlantic trade agreement. But I would say that there have been a lot of opponents also among European societies, particularly in the left-wing or left-leaning parties, because there have been parts of societies which wanted to make such trade deals so comprehensive, including so many matters, that basically it was not anymore about the trade, but many other things. So I think we failed with this, because if we would agree on the trade deal between United States and Europe, just like if United States would agree with a trade deal between US and Pacific nations, then we would be in a totally different position globally to tackle Chinese issues which are arising from that region. We were not smart in this regard, we abandoned this, and that basically means that there is no any more guarantee that we can build the future 20, 30 years trade deals, for instance, on the rules which are originating in liberal democracies. And I think this is a very, very big shame on our side. And the same is reflecting also to other issues. As far as misinformation you ask about our region, this is a smaller part, because yes, we have been living in permanent or semi-permanent attacks from the Russian side, because in Russia there are no free media, just like there is no in China free media, so they are used for different types of government goals. But this is why we in the Baltics are in many ways a litmus test for things which you already experience, or which you in the further Western countries in Europe will very soon experience. So this is why I mentioned also in other places these perfect excellence centers of NATO. In Estonia, the cybersecurity. In Lithuania, energy security. In Latvia, Excellence Center for Strategic Communication, which deals with misinformation actually very greatly. These excellence centers came not because we simply paid for this and we wanted it in our soil. This came because we had a bitter experience before you had it in our lands, and so we came with a positive proposal. Like in Aikido, we turned a negative experience into a positive activity. So in this case also, I think that most important thing is really to think in a common way, to invest in those issues which assists our technologies, our digital world, including also environment, and let's stick to transatlantic unity, no matter how difficult at this time this happens. This is the only way how we can in future deal with such challenges which are coming from authoritarian countries, be it China or Russia or any other country.
Thank you very much for this article of faith, if I may say, and we have to take the matters in our hands if we want to be properly defended. Is that your opinion?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, well, honestly saying, maybe a decade ago, China started to be very assertive, especially in the Czech Republic, in Central Europe, subsequently in Slovakia and in other parts, in Poland. And, we can see it now in various reports of intelligence agencies in countries of Central Europe and Eastern Europe that China is assertive. They invest a lot of money to economies, but they are also very active in activities touching upon security interests of countries, including modern technologies. Obviously, we have been able to see various countries signing a memoranda on telecommunication security, I would say, 5G. Also in Slovakia, we are now in the stage when we will choose who will build the whole 5G infrastructure. And this security challenge exists for sure. We need to be focused on. And as I told you, especially if you look to the Czech Republic, you'll see that China is very much active in various sectors in country. Not only economy, it's also politics. In Slovakia, not that much, but we see the first concrete examples of, I would say, assertive behavior.
Well, thank you very, very much for this fascinating discussion. I think we have succeeded in our hybrid, at least in the hybrid aspect of our conference. Minister Sejan, thank you very much for joining us from Ottawa. Minister Pavlik, thank you very much as well from Riga, and all the best to both of you. And Minister Nagy, thank you for being here with me. To the audience, the next session in this room is in 5 minutes, and the subject is how the EU will adapt after the pandemic in a digital age. And in the Habsburg room, the subject is the economic impact of climate change. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.